Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. we're just going to take a few moments as people are joining. And for those of you who have just come in, good afternoon and good evening. And for those of you who are on the more southern end of the world, if there is anybody here getting towards good night. I really appreciate you being here during this Friday afternoon. I'm Dr. Jamie Stewart, and I'm Senior Researcher and Team Lead at UNU Macau. My background is as a cultural and developmental psychologist, but the main part of the work I do at the moment is in cyber psychology. I'm very fortunate to be here today moderating this webinar with a group of amazing panelists that we have actually from very many different places. And I wanted to start off by thanking Tencent, who are the supporter of this webinar, and to everybody who's here at the moment, to highlight that this is one of two that we will be running, and to keep an eye out for the next one. But the first one that we are talking about is well-being in video games and navigating the digital playground. This is a particularly important and relevant topic to all of us here, and we hope to take you on a slightly different way of thinking about things than what you may have previously been exposed to. So we're going to be talking about many different elements of video games from a whole different set of points of view, all the way from parenting to digital co-play, to a little bit about children and children's voice within and well-being as they relate to gaming. I imagine that more people will be joining us as we go along, but I'm going to start getting right into it so we can get to the best part of this, which is actually not me talking. It's our panelist. So just to take you a little bit through what we're going to be covering today and understanding the schedule. Just first off, why are we running this webinar and why this is so important? Earlier in the year, I was at a conference, and one of the things that was discussed at that conference was the fact that young people are spending so much time online and so much time playing games, and not even young people are doing that, but we're all doing that. And why is that important? Why is play important? And it really got me thinking about this, about the concept of as a psychologist, about the meaningfulness of play and how play has changed as digital connectiveness and the pervasiveness of digital technologies have increased. What we know now is that playing video games or some form of games, and that can be educational types of games, games just for entertainment, many different types of games, are growing exponentially. 3.3 billion people. That is a very I would say call that a basic estimate, because we now know in high income countries that that the penetration of smartphones is incredibly high, and in some places getting towards 95%, meaning that people connect to the internet through their smartphones, and smartphones are often one of the critical places where people play games as well, if not necessarily always on a video game setup within your home, but there are many different ways of playing. And this number is just going to increase as gamification itself increases, and in gamification as a psychological and a behavioral way of engaging people in learning. Video games offer a whole variety of really important things for people. Entertainment, as I said already, connection, but also self-efficacy, a feeling of being good, a feeling of competency, and learning. So, as I said, gamification is an incredibly important place where technology is going. One of the critical things that we know, and probably has been around for quite a long time, I'd say ever since I show my age, but video games where that involved some form of violence, that there has been a sense that video games could be unhealthy, or in some forms of video games, or if they use excessively or under some conditions. And that sort of idea has persisted for a very long time, but that doesn't mean that's necessarily true for all forms of video games or for all young people or under all contexts. And so it's really important for us in this now very different world from where video games started to think about what those conditions are and what it means for video game playing to be a part of something that is healthy and well for children and for everybody. So this webinar started on the basis of, we know that the influence of video games is complex. It's often not talked about in a complex way. It's talked about in a relatively non-complex way about risks. But actually, what can we tell about the evidence for the positive as compared to the negative effects on well-being on children and youth? For whom are there positive effects? Under what conditions are there positive effects? And how can we increase those positive effects for young people? I'm not going to have a chance to talk about this in depth, but we're very, very fortunate to have Professor Daniel Johnson here in the room who will be discussing this more. I really wanted to briefly introduce a very important report that was recently authored and made available, April 2024, from the Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child, the University of Sheffield, New York University, and CNUI, but led by UNICEF, that talked about responsible innovation and technology for children. I strongly encourage people to read this report. I won't, I feel like I'll ruin the wonderful and beautiful surprise of this report, which is that it focuses on children's voices, it focuses on how important video games are from young people's points of view. But I also wanted to highlight this is a wonderful resource that you can connect into that highlights some of the good work that's being done to cross policy and research. And I also put in this, what I think is a wonderful infographic, which is also from the Centre for the Digital Child, with a QR code there that you can connect into, which highlights for kids in language that's accessible to children and parents about what video games can do to help on the basis of this research. That is, children can feel, from children's point of view, that games can make them feel good about themselves, competent, make them creative, strengthen their friendships, and not just their friendships, but their connections with their family, help them regulate emotions, and enable personal exploration and identity formation. So these are all some really wonderful things that we're finding is going on within the broader environment about video games for young people right now. And you'll hear more about this from our panelists. As we move into the next section, where I will be stepping back and we'll be hearing from everybody else, I want to take you through the schedule for today. And we have 5 presentations, 5 different points of view about different elements, different factors and features that relate to video games and young people. We're going to be starting off with Dr. Huang Zhejiang, who's going to be talking to us about co-playing, and that is playing digital video games amongst the family. And then Lydia Liang is going to be talking to us about the relationship between family education and children's attitudes and behaviors towards online gaming. Then we have Dr. Wang Xu, who will be talking to us about game tech and its positive impact on youth. And then Professor Daniel Johnson will be talking to us very broadly about video games and well-being, and also about some of the work that I just mentioned about responsible tech. And then lastly, we'll have Auxane Boch, who will be talking to us about the good, the bad, and the not so ugly about video games and its impact. Each panelist is going to have 8 minutes to present their own points of view around impacts of positive and negative impacts of video games on children and youth's well-being, and to unpack some of that nuance that I talked about. And while those presentations are going, I very strongly encourage everybody in the audience to ask questions in the Q&A section of Zoom. As you're asking those questions, please put the name of the speaker that you're interested in asking the question to. So if it's specifically for Zhejiang, can you please put question for Zhejiang or Q for Zhejiang, and then what the question is. If it's for everybody in the room, please feel free to simply write your question. We won't be able to unmute you, and we can't see you as attendees. So this is the way that you can interact with us and really get the most possible out of this panel. After we have the panel presentations, as I said, write your questions as they go along. Don't wait to the end. After we have that, we'll have closing remarks from the panelists, and then we're going to have, if we stay to time, which I'm sure we will, because we have a very responsible group of people here, we're going to have at least 20 minutes so that we can cover off any of those lingering questions that you have. And I do want to say that, you know, you can connect with me via my information here, but I will be moderating the Q&A at the end and supporting the panelists to keep to time as we go through. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I've myself have gone a little over time, but I feel like I'm still getting there. We're going to start off with Dr. Huang Jiejang, if you wouldn't mind, please sharing your screen, and if the other panelists would please turn off their videos for the time being. Jiejang, I'm just going to do a very brief overview of your background before we start. So again, Lydia, if you wouldn't mind just turning off your video for now, and that way it can help when we're going to the next slide. Okay. Welcome to Dr. Huang Jiejang, who is Assistant Professor at the Department of Media and Communications at Jiaotong Liverpool University in Suzhou. Jiao, I'm sorry, my pronunciation, terrible, in China. The presentation today does co-playing help, digital gaming and digital parenting in Chinese families. Dr. Jiejang Huang's research focuses on pressing issues that pertain to digital game industry, media entrepreneurship, cultural policy and creative economy, digital inequalities and digital privacy. His ongoing research project examines parent-child relationships around digital privacy and gaming in contemporary Chinese household settings. I'm passing directly over to you to start your presentation.
Thanks for your kind introduction, Jamie. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gejun Huang. I'm so pleased to kick off this fantastic panel with my empirical research on how the co-playing might be a practical solution to help mitigating some existing issues in digital parenting contextualized in the Chinese family context. So the landscape of youth gaming in China has drawn a lot of attention, not just from academia, but from the whole spectrum of our society. There are a couple of reasons for that. For sure, China has the world's largest number of youth gamers. And many young kiddos and teenagers come to the gaming scene for socialization needs. As a result, the youth gaming has become the top concern, not just among the Chinese family, but also have raised a lot of policy interventions from the government. And for instance, like the limitation, the maximum number of hours of gaming for youth through policy interventions. And there are a couple of social factors that are contributing to this family struggle with youth gaming. The idea of filiarchy and the replacement effects of digital gaming have been pervasive in the Chinese case. And as a result, these factors have fueled the public discourses that raise the hostility against youth gaming. And even to the degree that many news coverage or even research and academic reports tend to pathologize excessive youth gaming activities as gaming addiction. Therefore, in the past decade, there have been many scientifically unwarranted treatments sprung up in China that meet parents' growing anxiety, but also complicate family dynamics. On my end, I'm trying to see whether co-playing will help solve some of the digital parenting issues. In prior research, the parents' mediation over TV and digital media consumption has been an established research focus. And according to prior research, there are three major forms of digital parenting methods: restriction, monitoring, and productive use. However, the last one is really hard to be materialized in the Chinese context, as the parent-child power relations over household digital use have been quite asymmetric in the Chinese case, and that often intermingles with the digital inequalities. That said, some research have shown that co-playing could enhance family ties and increase children's digital creativity. So that really ties to Jamie's sharing of the recent report on children's and digital gaming. So here are my research questions. First, I'm interested in knowing how parents' co-playing frequency and perception vary by factors contributing to digital inequalities. And second, how do parents' co-playing frequency and perception account for their digital parenting approach? And for each research question, I'm trying to test four sets of hypotheses in order to provide answers. And then here a little bit details about my method data. So this research draws on an online survey data from early last year and which targeted Chinese parents who have at least one child in the Yangtze River Delta region. And only parents with minors are included in this research, and the sample size was 843. In terms of demographics, my sample was relatively gender balanced, and more than half of the respondents are in their 20s, 30s, with some college degree and above, living in non-urban areas with annual family income over 300,000 RMB, and at least with one minor between 6 and 12 years old. So I implemented a set of hierarchical regression models with social demographic variable controlled. And I'd like to provide some details about my data. In terms of these two key variables, the frequency and perception of co-playing, the frequency shows a very interesting pattern that about 1/3 of the parents reported they often co-played with their children. Then about 42% of them reported they would co-play with their children sometimes and always. By contrast, their perception of co-playing shows very interesting pattern. About 23% they would agree that they enjoyed co-playing with their children. However, on the opposite end, 22% would disagree that they enjoy co-playing with their children, and there another 22% show a neutral opinion towards enjoyment of co-playing with their children. And I'll skip some of my hypothesis testing and come to the summary of my findings. So it shows that the parents' age, education, and income would affect their infrequency of co-playing with their children, while only age affects their enjoyment of co-playing. And second, to my surprise, parents' digital access and skill do not affect their frequency and enjoyment of co-playing with children. Third, parents who co-play with their children frequently less prone to apply restrictive and monitoring-based digital parenting methods. By contrast, parents who enjoy co-playing are less prone to apply monitoring-based digital parenting methods. So it has no effects on restrictive digital parenting methods. Okay, so here are my final thoughts based on my findings. So first, I would suggest that the co-playing should be treated as a digital skill central to digital parenting in Chinese household settings. Many Chinese parents, based on my observation, they are very hesitant to engage children's gaming behaviors directly or in presence, as they thought that these behaviors are not critical to the success of their children. However, my study shows that cultivating co-playing skills, or at least try to co-play with their children in physical space, would enhance their approach to digital parenting. Try to avoid using those restrictive and the monitoring-based interventions. Second, in these digitally saturated environments, as I mentioned earlier, all my samples responses were located in the Yangtze River Delta region. The varying degrees of parents' behavior and perception of co-playing are tied to the social demographic markers of digital inequality, which adds another layer of difficulty to enact digital inclusion strategies while concerning the digital parenting issues. Third, by contrast, co-playing is not necessarily built upon parents' digital access and skill, which opens up new challenges and opportunity for digital literacy intervention. Last, co-playing has shown some great potential to be harnessed towards more effective ways of digital parenting, aka those productive use, and as well as easing parent-child tension over household digital policy. And I'll skip my limitation part, but I'd like to answer some of the questions regarding this. And here my reference list. That's the end of my presentation. I thank you so much and look forward to your comments and questions.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Huang. That was very, very interesting. If other people don't have questions, I certainly do. And particularly fascinating to see that that there are these divergences in terms of parental enjoyment, and that as a potential barrier, but as a skill and a place for intervention that we can think about in terms of digital skill building within the family. It was absolutely fascinating, and I really do look forward to asking you some questions. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we're going to now move on to Ms. Lydia Liang. And again, I just want to highlight to everybody, please do put some questions into the chat as you have heard these fabulous presentations and as it's in your mind. Lydia, would you please share your slides with us and turn on your video so that we can see you, and I will introduce you. Great. So we're very lucky to have Ms. Lydia Liang, who is a digital parenting consultant from Tencent Wellbeing of Youth Users team, and who will be talking about some really fascinating work that is being supported by Tencent in terms of working with parents. So Lydia is, as I said, a digital parenting consultant, and she has more than 10 years of experience in educational consultation, specializing in parent-child relationships, communication during adolescence, and addressing teenagers' internet addiction. We're very much looking forward to your presentation today, Lydia. Please feel free to start as soon as you're ready.
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Okay, so thank you for your introduction. Next, I will share my views and thoughts. Well, conflicts over mobile phone time management are a global issue for parents. The problem is particularly prominent in China due to several factors: long working hours for parents, high academic pressure, a lack of same-age playmates, the prevalence of live supervised children in rural areas, limited access to offline recreational venues, and a lack of parental awareness of positive interventions. According to a recent survey, more than 80% of parents spend less than 2 hours a day at their disposal with their children. The survey also finds that the majority Chinese minors have very limited free time for themselves. Playing mobile games ranks number 3 among their preferred entertainment activities after playing with friends and watching short videos. China has implemented stringent measures limiting mobile gaming for minors to 3 hours per week, along with regulations on identity verification and purchase limits. Game companies have been strict in adhering to these regulations, with Tencent in the lead. As the largest game company, Tencent has gone a step further by offering guidance and consultation to parents. So I come from Tencent Minor Protection Center. Since 2017, the Tencent Minor Protection Center has expanded from a 20-person service group to a 500-person professional team dedicated to providing comprehensive network protection and services for families with minors. The center handles the follow-up intervention of Tencent's efforts to safeguard minors. Compared to an early detection and protection scheme, it has set up a national hotline to provide assistance and protection for minors using social media, payment systems, games, and other digital products. The center also combines practical business needs with its mission by incorporating cybersecurity education for manners, promoting awareness of cyber laws, and offering digital literacy education for families. This has helped build a comprehensive and unique protection system tailored to Tencent approach. So next, I'll introduce the achievements on what we do. So far, it has served more than 36 million users and promoted the development of internet literacy, network security awareness, family education, and psychological safety. It introduced a non-profit online education counseling service, established an educational psychology counseling team to offer expert support and provided support and guidance. And it empowered parents with the tools and knowledge to effectively navigate the challenges of raising children in the digital age. Now, let me share with you some of the key viewpoints. First, a higher level of parental digital literacy can positively shape children's understanding and responsible use of online games. When parents model effective internet management and information identification skills, children develop a broader perception of the internet beyond just playing games or watching videos. Instead, they use the internet as a tool for learning and personal development. Parental indifference or strict control over gaming can lead to increased time spent by children on gaming. Conversely, when parents actively engage in gaming with their children, it promotes the development of good time management skills. Through patient guidance and effective communication, parents can better align with their children on the appropriate purpose and duration of internet use, fostering a mutual understanding of game time limits. Second, reciprocal effect of children gaming habits on family education, often promoting parents to refine their guidance methods. The top priority for Tencent's family consultant team is to help parents who often express concerns about managing their children's gaming behavior, understanding that maintaining strong family relationships is crucial. By fostering better family connections, parents can more effectively address and resolve any issues related to their children's game behavior. We offer educational and psychological counseling services to families facing challenges related to these issues. A special team composed of detective education and psychological experts has been established to provide free counseling services to families across the country, including one-versus-one counseling and tutoring, public forums and lectures, and so on. Third, passion for gameplay can stimulate children's creativity and curiosity for learning. Here is a case I want to share with you. A 16-year-old boy from Fuzhou, Jiangxi, lived with his grandparents while his parents and younger brother worked elsewhere. In junior high, he frequently skipped school and spent a lot of time playing games. When his guardians took away his phone, he quietly protested by crying but never explained why he refused to attend school. Eventually, his uncle took him to a psychiatrist where he was diagnosed with an emotional disorder. After dropping out, he moved in with his parents. It turned out that his gaming obsession was driven by a deep interest in tanks. He frequently watched military videos, kept a notebook of tank data, and wanted to build a tank model. We suggested that his father use this passion to strengthen their bond and support his son's emotional needs. This approach worked. The boy returned to school with a renewed focus and now dreams of attending a military university. In recent years in China, stakeholders have increasingly focused on well-being of manners. We have established partnerships with local governments, academic institutions, and social organizations, and our efforts have been recognized by these groups. Looking ahead, we aim to continue contributing to the success of young people in the digital age. In conclusion, when it comes to the relationship between well-being and gaming for teenagers, let's be vigilant in better understanding their circumstances and needs, guiding and supporting them. Let's help our young ones navigate the digital playground in a way that promotes their well-being and growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Again, another very, very interesting presentation, and extending on many of the findings from the previous panelist, looking at parenting in terms of needs for support and education for parents. I particularly enjoyed the case study that you gave us, which really talks about some of the complexity and nuance for why young people might, and some young people with particular interests might engage with game playing, and in context where that can be used in a beneficial way. This idea of the challenges that parents face and technology companies actively seeking to support and address some of those challenges was absolutely wonderful to hear about. So thank you very, very much for that, Lydia. And I would again ask everybody who has some questions for Lydia to please put those into the Q&A, and we will answer those questions at the very end of the session. Again, if you don't have questions for Lydia, I'm sure I certainly do. Thank you so much, Lydia. And we are now on to our next panelist, and I can't believe how quickly the time is going already. Lydia, could you please stop sharing your presentation, and then we can make room for Dr. Wang Shu. Wang, could you please put on your video and start sharing your screen?
Okay.
Okay, I'm just going to do a brief introduction, and then we can get to your presentation. So we're very pleased again to have another representative, but from a totally different team, and talking about this in a very different way, I think. From a very technological point of view, we have Dr. Wang Shu, who's a postdoctoral fellow at Tencent Research Center, who's going to be talking to us today about game tech and its positive impact on youth. So Dr. Wang Shu is he is a joint postdoctoral fellow with Tsinghua University, and his research interest broadly includes the video game industry, games in general, and culture. We're very happy to have you here with us, Wang, and we're ready to start whenever you are, so please go ahead.
Okay. Thanks for the introduction. And hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm Wang Shu from Tencent Research Institute. Today, I'm going to talk about game tech and its positive impact on youth. Before the presentation, we can start with a video. Okay, what you just saw was not a movie or pre-made CG, but an Unreal Engine 5 experience of The Matrix Awakening, released by Epic Games, an investment of Tencent. As you may see, the city that you just saw includes 7 million instant assets, each of which consists of millions of polygons. There are thousands of buildings and hundreds of thousands of arcade vehicles. And traditionally, if you rely on manual production to design and produce such a video content, you may need to spend a lot of time and resources. But today, based on game tech like Unreal Engine 5, which most of the characters, buildings, vehicles, and roads we see in the video can be automatically generated, which greatly improves the efficiency of content production. And next, I will introduce game technology, which is called game tech, from two parts, game engine and game AI. In the first part, I would like to talk about the game engine. What is game engine? We define it as tools for interactions between virtual and reality. It creates virtual scenes in the form of code packages and dynamically presents their changing appearance states, supporting real-time interaction with the physical world. I mean, the difference between a game engine and the traditional industrial software is that it can let us to interact with the real world. The mainstream game engines nowadays are Unreal and Unity. Most of the mobile games today we played are developed by Unity, and most of the PC games are developed by Unreal. And the second part will be the game AI. What is game AI? Here I want to say video games are a key proving ground for artificial intelligence systems. Like the real world, games are rich learning environments with responsive real-time settings and ever-changing goals. In recent years, there have been many studies on game AI in academia. You may not know that the birth of ChatGPT is also inseparable from games. In a conversation between NVIDIA's CEO and OpenAI's former chief scientist, Ilya, once they mentioned that there has been real convergence where the GPT produced the foundation and the reinforcement learning from data morphed into reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that combination gave us ChatGPT. And beside that, in 2019 and 2021, research on game AI also appeared on the cover of Nature magazines. In the practice today, Tencent also has combined the game engine with AI and developed a set of tools called Generative, which can not only be used by professional game developers, but also allowed ordinary people and players to participate in the production of game content. Now, here's a short video about this game engine.
AI 正在变革游戏。腾讯 Generative 游戏 AI 引擎提供全面的生成式 AI 与决策 AI 工具，助力开发者打造升级有限的游戏世界。在 Generative， 开发者可以更轻松地创作虚拟世界，快速搭建庞大的3D 场景，设计角色并赋予生命。玩家也能共创剧情和关卡，灵感自由释放。AI Agent 通过模拟玩法、自动测试、加速验证和实现新的创意。走进游戏，它为每位玩家提供个性化的互动，陪伴大家一起探索全新的游戏体验。注入无限智能 ，Generative 期待驱动游戏进入全新境界。
Okay, here we may ask, you may have questions. So what the positive impacts does game tech have on teenagers? Well, in our research, on the one hand, game tech lowers the threshold for content production and will become a universal content productivity tools in the future. For teenagers, with the help of game tech, they will have more opportunities to create their own content and realize their own creativities and ideas in video games. Imagine that. In the future, you may be able to use these tools to make your own games. And also, on the other hand, with the development of game technology, it can also provide a platform for the cultivation of young AI talents. For example, Tencent's AI Arena platform relies on the core strengths of Tencent AI platform department and honor of kings in algorithm, computer power, and experimental scenarios. It provides academic researchers and algorithm developers with a world-leading research application experiment platform. Today, Tencent AI Arena has set up an AI talent development program and the AI Nation open competitions to encourage young people who interested in AI to continuously innovate AI technology. Well, now the AI program offers university fun and innovative courses that align with AI knowledge. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. As a technology and a cultural company, Tencent will create more excellent game products based on its own technological advantages. On the one hand, Tencent will rely on the Tencent AI platform department and all of Kings to create a wonderful experiment platform for the researchers and the AI talents. On the other hand, Tencent will rely on its powerful AI game engine capabilities to provide players with opportunities to create content so that every player's creativity can be realized in video games. Okay, that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for that presentation. A little bit of a different point of view for your presentation about the technology, and then following up with how that technology can be used to maybe democratize some of the game playing. And I do want to say, wow, like for the video at the beginning, which was incredibly immersive and very, very realistic. I think there are some really important elements of thinking about young people as producers of knowledge and gaming themselves, and what Tencent is doing within that space in terms of making that possible, particularly through the youth development programs, as you're talking about. And I also just wanted to highlight, I really liked the comment that you made, which was talking about AI systems in gaming as rich learning environments themselves. You know, thinking about AI as learning and us as learning about AI, as well as young people interfacing with that, which I think is quite a fantastic metaphor for this entire webinar. Thank you so much. And again, I will highlight that your questions will be answered at the end. I hope you have lots of questions about that fantastic game tech that Tencent is running with. We now have our fourth panelist, Professor Daniel Johnson. Daniel, would you please put on your video and start sharing your screen so that I can introduce you? Okay, so we're very lucky to have Professor Johnson from the Queensland University of Technology back in my heart's home in Brisbane, who is going to be talking to us about video games and wellbeing. Professor Johnson really is a national and international leader within this space, and very appreciative of him taking time out of his evening in Australia, his Friday evening, to be here with us. Just to give you a brief overview of Daniel's expertise, his leadership is understanding people's interactions with technology in terms of their motivations to engage and the impact on well-being. His particular expertise and player experience of video games, the impact of video games on well-being, including addiction, esports, and how to apply the principles of game design in non-entertainment settings, that is gamification. He's the chief investigator on projects of over $45 million from the ARC, the Australian Research Council, the NHMRC, which are two of the most prestigious funding bodies in Australia. And he's also worked with UNICEF very closely in the report that I mentioned earlier on, as the chief investigator of the Centre of Excellence for the Digital Child, which I have to say, from a personal point of view, is one of the leading research centres on digital technology and youth development in the world. He's ranked #1 in the Asia Pacific for his research on gamification, so we're very lucky to have him here. I will now pass over to Professor Johnson. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Jamie, for that very generous introduction. Let's see what we can get through in 8 minutes. I've selected a few things that I hope will be interesting to this audience. My contact details are there, and I'd love to hear from you if you want to talk about any of this more. Most of the work we do in the lab where I'm from is around self-determination and passion. And I wanted to start with that today. For people that haven't come across it, this is the basic idea that sort of describes both what motivates us to play video games, but also what creates the well-being we experience in response to playing video games. So the basic idea is that video games are incredibly good at satisfying these universal needs for competence, autonomy, and relatedness. And if you've played games, you know what I'm talking about. They make you feel good at them. You feel a sense of freedom, both in choosing to play them and how you play them while you're playing them. And they're a really good way to connect with other people. So you experience those needs. Knowing that you can get those needs met through video games motivates you to play, and in turn, the satisfaction of those needs creates well-being. So the interesting thing is that if we're drawn to an activity because of satisfaction of those needs, over time, we'll develop a passion for that activity. And that passion can take one of two forms. A harmonious passion is what it sounds like. It's when the activity is personally important, you choose it freely, it's in harmony with the rest of your life. In contrast, obsessive passion is usually experienced as a compelled or driven need, and it leads activities into conflict with other facets of your life. And this is not just true of video games, it's true of education, sport, work, media consumption. And in all those areas, when you have harmonious passion, you tend to see positive outcomes. And when you have obsessive passion, you tend to see negative outcomes. And we've heard other speakers speaking to this basic idea already, maybe not with these terms, but I'll come back to that. A little bit more on passion, significant but not overpowering for harmonious passion. And obsessive passion, it's almost like a pressure from contingencies, uncontrollable urges. You might do it because all your friends are doing it and you feel like you won't be accepted if you don't do it. You might do it out of a need for self-esteem. And what we found in our research and others have found around the world is that passion, rather than time spent playing, is a much better predictor of a range of well-being related outcomes. So often we think is how long you spend playing as being the most important thing, but it turns out it's really not. And it's actually much more about the kind of passion you have. And to briefly sort of put some meat on those bones, if you think about 3 hours of play when you're on holidays, after spending the day at the beach, it doesn't sound so concerning, but 3 hours of play the night before a significant exam might not be appropriate. So it's perhaps unsurprising that the kind of passion you bring in is much more important than time spent playing. So, to just build on this idea a little bit more, we get this need satisfaction from games, and it can lead to either harmonious or obsessive passion, and that in turn can either have a positive or a negative impact on well-being. So what's interesting to ask once you take that into account is, well, what determines whether a person develops a harmonious or an obsessive passion, right? Because it's so important which kind of passion you have. And what we found, again, and others around the world have found, is that it's actually not much to do with the game that is the primary determinant here. It's much more to do with, are you having your needs satisfied in the rest of your life, or are you having your needs frustrated or thwarted in the rest of your life? If you have a lack of need satisfaction in other areas of your life, then you're more likely to develop an obsessive passion. And we call that a compensatory response. So you're compensating for the fact that you're not getting your needs met at work or at school or in your relationships by focusing on video games as the primary source of need satisfaction. And that we heard about that earlier. And so the implications of this are really important. It means that if you see someone experiencing negative outcomes associated with their play, and we might even call that problematic play, the worst thing we could do is to stop them playing, because that's the one place they're getting their needs satisfied. It's much more important that we substitute other sources of need satisfaction for them rather than taking their one source of need satisfaction away. I could talk for days about that, but I'll try and move on to some other things now. Here I want to talk about the work of Jessica Formosa. She led this work in our lab. It's to do with this model that I'm talking about, but in the context of stressful life events. So Jess, soon to be Dr. Formosa, ended up with a really unique opportunity. Her work was launched prior to the pandemic. We didn't know the pandemic was coming, obviously. And then the pandemic hit in the middle of her survey. So we ended up with two sets of data, one pre-COVID and one during COVID. And that gave us this really unique opportunity to compare how this model worked in a non-stressful situation overall and a very stressful situation overall. So pre-COVID, we saw, similar to what I've described to you, passion was related to problematic play. Harmonious passion performed a protective role. Obsessive passion put you at greater risk of problematic play. We found that passion did not strongly relate to the broader well-being. And that fits with other work. I won't go into that today. We can leave it for questions if you have them. But then during the pandemic, we found that even with increased hours of play, harmonious passion began to be associated with well-being benefits, and even obsessive passion was associated with some benefits. So in the context of that really stressful life event, video games played a really important role of giving people an escape or giving something them healthy and rewarding to do. There's a lot of implications for the benefits of play during stressful times, and I invite you to read that paper by Jess in the corner there. I'm jumping around a little bit now, but I did in this topic today just want to spend a moment talking about my concerns to do with the classification of gaming disorder. I don't think any of us deny that problematic play can occur, but I think the classification of disorders has been quite harmful and quite dangerous. If we look at the DSM-5 definition, there's a number of elements that I think are quite concerning or quite difficult to call problematic. Preoccupation or obsession, or preoccupation here, being preoccupied with something you really love is not inherently a pathological thing. If you love yoga, of course you're going to think about yoga when you're not doing yoga, and the same is true of video games. If this idea of withdrawal symptoms associated with digital technology, I find quite problematic because, withdrawal makes sense in the context of a substance, but not necessarily in the context of something like a behavior or of digital play. The same with tolerance. The idea that you would want to play more the more you play is potentially quite healthy. With time in mind, I'll cut down to this notion of escapism. This has come out in Jess's work as well, but the idea that using digital technology as a way to escape is inherently harmful or bad is problematic as well. Escaping can be a really healthy way of regulating emotions, and it's quite concerning that it gets sort of painted in these ways. In much the same way, but I will say I quite slightly prefer this ICD-11 definition because it ties the whole notion of problematic play to significant impairment in other areas of life. And I think that's a much more potentially useful way of thinking about it. Again, I've got more to say on that, but I'll leave it for questions. The one other thing I did want to touch on, as promised, is the UNICEF RITEC project, and I'll acknowledge my colleague Shuli, who's here at the webinar today, who's been playing a leading role in this work of late. Here, our part of the project was inviting children into the lab and using biometric sensors to study how they experience play, and then getting them to help us interpret their data after they played the game. So we asked them to help us understand what their biometrics might be showing. We found evidence for a lot of benefits of play that is shown in the diagram there. And we also found that psychophysiological data was a very valuable tool in discussing children's player experiences and understanding how they were feeling and why. I'll skip, there's a great study there you might look up one day. There's some great work going on at the center. And overall, I would just point out that most of the work we've done points to this idea that what you play and how much you play is not nearly as important as who you play with and your experience while playing. Thanks very much.
Wow, that was action-packed. Daniel, thank you so much for that. I want to say there were so many gold nuggets in there. I really liked your discussion about obsessive passion as distraction as compared to escapism and what that means in stressful times and how we can manage that. What an amazing finding to really give some complexity to this. I have some questions about awareness of one's needs and metacognition, but I did want to say that so much of what you're doing really synthesizes the work, the developmental psychological work so well when we're talking about connected nets of people and places where young people feel good. And when you take away the only thing that they have, what are they left with? So we need other things to structure and scaffold. And I just really enjoyed how you put that into context of gaming. And particularly, I just wanted to highlight, we think it from a masculinities point of view, and some of the places where young men go to and where they get their needs for some of their needs met with, so they may not be able to within broader social cultural environments. So this was Absolutely fabulous to me. I also I put a little question in there for my own self-interest, which was the relationship between some of this and online disinhibition and how we can feed that in, because that's a normative peer relationships. I just want to say that I do wish we had more time, and if we are able, we will share the slides with the participants so that they can follow up on some of your research, which you didn't have so much time to cover. I'm sure you'll get lots of questions. Thank you so much, Daniel. Very much appreciated. And we're going to move on to our final, last but not least, panelists, Auxane Boch, soon to be doctor. Again, Auxane Boch, could you please share your slides, and I'll do a brief introduction. Auxane is Associate Researcher at the Institute for Ethics of Artificial Intelligence at the Technical University of Munich. She's had the chance to work on multiple AI ethics related topics, such as education and AI and the use during the COVID-19 pandemic, ethical implications from cultural perspectives, as well as AI in healthcare and general accountability for AI systems in Europe. She's a doctoral candidate, but she has recently submitted. That's why I said she's nearly doctor. And her work focuses on the ethics of interactional technologies from a psychological perspective. We're very lucky to have Auxane here today to talk to us about the good, the bad, and the not so ugly of video game impacts. Please go ahead, Auxane.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And yeah, there we go. So you've done already a very good introduction of myself, and I'll just add that I'm the opposite of Jamie when it comes to psych specialty. I am a cyber psychologist that works on cultural stuff. So hopefully today what the presentation will be about is just to wrap up a little bit what everything else has been saying, really. I'm going to talk about the general impacts coming from the literature, and just give an overall perspective on, okay, what do we know works from video game, and what do we know might be a bit challenging from video game, from the impact of video games. The point here is mainly to educate a bit more, give different perspectives, and make sure we can have full conversations about this. The first thing I want to talk about is cognitive impact, then I'll talk a little bit about well-being, even though, of course, we've just seen a great presentation about it. And then I'll go to social impact and wrap up main recommendations. So, cognitive impact. What we know about video games is that it's actually quite cool to play video games for your cognitive skills. In general, it will help with a bunch of higher cognitive abilities, such as problem solving, for example, playing puzzle games, strategy games, etc. Also with time management, if some of you have played games that are very time challenging, where they give a lot of quick decisions to make, this is actually very good to help with your general time management, but also with your decision making, quick decision making. So those skills are transferable, and that's what's important to keep in mind, is that when you train those muscles through games, they actually apply to your everyday life, which is quite fantastic, really, because you can enjoy, have a great time, and still have very good repercussion in your everyday life. Also, an important point is that it helps with attentional control and learning, therefore, as a consequence. So if you play video games, for instance, in another language, and we see that a lot in online gaming, the fact to play, for instance, in English will actually help a lot, which is super cool. You can also play games that teach you languages, and because they're so engaging, they're going to keep you in, and that's going to help you a lot. Attentional skill usually is linked to engagement, but this muscle of keeping engaged in a task will actually be transferable because it's a muscle. So the same way, if you swim, it's going to help you run. If you play a video game that trains your attention, it's going to help you study. And so in general, this suggests that playing video games can just enhance a lot of abilities, cognitive abilities that are transferable. Now, when we talk about health and well-being, I'm not going to go back to the debate that Daniel opened on the gaming addiction and internet gaming disorder, etc., because I wanted to mention it. You did it better than I would, so thank you very much for that. And I actually added a few questions in the Q&A for this. But let's talk about positive effect first, and then I'll go to dark patterns. So we know that playing games, as Daniel showed, can have a very positive effect on the general well-being, but also I want to talk about the physical well-being. So when you have a game that makes you run or makes you, I don't know if some of you played the Wii. We used to have the Wii Fit, right? Where you could do the boxing, you could do the bowling, you can do the steps. This is actually very positive. And again, this relates a lot to engagement. So because it is fun and because you're engaged, there is a possibility there to have a better physical fitness happening. So instead of having sedentary games, we could use games to help people get back in shape. And I'm thinking here about immersive realities as well. So VR, for instance, where now we see already that we have some cycling games in VR. And this is fantastic because for someone that hasn't done sports in a while, this could be a good option, right? And especially when you have limited space, limited secure environment to do specific sports, there is a big opportunity there because we see that this works. We see with kids in research that this works. Kids want to play more, even if they're not physically fit initially. Then we have the social and general well-being that is actually heightened if you're in a healthy environment. One game that was studied for this during the pandemic as well was Animal Crossing. Maybe some of you played it during the pandemic. It was a big thing, right? I mean, I still have my village, haven't touched it since the pandemic ended, but this can be very positive and value producing for humans. And finally, the question of flow state, which is quite nice as well. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. I'm pretty sure most of you would have felt it before. The flow state is a state of operation in which a person performing an activity is fully immersed. For instance, when you're in a very good book and you stop looking at time and you stop looking at what's on your to-do list, you completely forget all of this. You're just focused and energized and fully involved in what you're doing. This can happen when you work as well. When I write a paper, hopefully I reach that flow state and this paper gets written. So everyone can experience it in different tasks. And when you play a game, you can also do that. And it's quite enjoyable. And this is actually very good for mental health and well-being. This is linked to mindfulness and meditation states. This is on the same spectrum. So it is quite positive for your brain to have a bit of space to compute the day, compute what's happening in your life, because you're focused on something else and having a good time about it. I'm just checking the time, making sure I'm not taking too much time. Okay. And finally, the potential downsides, though, when we talk about video game, I want to mention the loot boxing aspect, which looks a little bit like gambling, and all the dark patterns that can be embedded in games. I'm thinking about League of Legends, that has been a very well-mentioned game for this. And how this could be used to target people. So knowing psychology and the psychology of gamers can also lead to game design that are negative and that will make people, for instance, play more than they initially meant or spend money, which usually is the target of the dark patterns and the loot boxing. So finally, talking quickly, because I see the time running, about social behavior in multiplayer games, we would have, for instance, in World of Warcraft, the promotion of teamwork and collaboration amongst players, which is fantastic because this can teach you to know your skills and the skills of others and how this can be helpful in the future. So actually, when you apply for jobs in tech companies, that might be a plus to say that you've been playing World of Warcraft forever and be in a guild forever because they know that you know how to put yourself in a team and how to work in a team. Communication, social interaction skills, and empathy. This was a lot with children. So they checked how this could impact the interaction between kids, especially when they get frustrated. And this helps them a lot to understand better the other and understand how to not take have a fit, right? And finally, the storytelling can actually have very good upsides about getting more empathy for another group, and potentially impact their behavior in real life towards others. This is a topic I can talk for ages about. This is actually the heart of my research in video games, so feel free to ask questions about that. And I just want to mention online harassment and toxic behavior. We don't want that. This is bad. This is actually very wrong for a lot of reasons. So this would be the biggest downside about this multiplayer gaming area. And in general, competition seems to be more bad for people than collaboration. So having collaborative games seems also to be good. Balancing the impacts, I'm leaving this slide here. I'm letting you read it, but it's just summarizing everything else, and I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Auxane. You know, I think we did a really good job of structuring these presentations to have you synthesize all of this at the end, as well as provide so many research citations for people to take away with them. I did want to say I really liked that you brought in the cognitive element here, as well as the physical health elements. When we're talking about well-being, oftentimes the concepts of well-being is people can think mental health, but we did also talk very much here within this webinar about social health and mental health, but we need to talk about physical health, because well-being, especially for young people, is holistic and complex system of all of these different areas of well-being. And one of the things that you mentioned there was about the skills that are developed in online environments through gaming and how they translate. And I wanted to kind of unpack one of the implicit things that you said there, which is like those sorts of skills, the future skills that things that are being developed quite naturally through video games, how they're not often given credibility, but maybe gaming companies would. Maybe in the future these will be the competencies that we put onto our CV. And I did want to say, if you find flow in writing papers, maybe you can tell the rest of us where you get that from. Thank you very much, Auxane. And I'll get you to stop sharing your screen, and for all of the panelists to please put on your video cameras so that we can see your faces. And while we're doing closing remarks, everybody all the participants will have a chance to continue to ask questions, either within the overall chat or within the Q&A. I do see that we have quite a few questions in there at the moment, so we're definitely not going to be we're not going to have all the time to ask all the questions that I wanted to, but I can do that later. So to end, before we get into the Q&A, I wanted to give each panelist just a couple of minutes. I'd say 2 minutes maximum. I'm not going to time you. And you all did a wonderful job of keeping on time more generally, to give some final comments. And in either you can address the question about how can stakeholders, in this room, as well as amongst the participants to this webinar, we're coming from many different areas, from industry, from academia, from policy making. I don't know that we have youth representatives, but I do think there are a lot more younger people in the room than me. So maybe we also have some youth or citizens, or children would be another stakeholder. But how can we come together to enable positive video gaming experiences into the future? You can either answer that question, or you can address some of the synthesis that has come up in the room. We're going to go in the order of the panelists. So we will start again with Dr. Huang Jiezhang. Please go ahead with your final comments.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. My perception or my reflection on the topic I just brought up is that as scholars working on digital parenting and children's gameplay behaviors, the crux of matter that many parents have perceived, usually and not on their children's end, but on themselves. So as scholars, we need to really get out of our own comfort zone, really need to get out of the campus, the universities, the college, to talk to those parents, right? To host workshops that become more accessible to parents who never try to play with their children, who never try to understand their children's gaming behaviors, who would never think positively about gaming, right? So that's something I have been doing since the pandemic, and I have been reaching out to some civil organizations like game museums to try to establish some collaboration that really target parents who want to address their children's excessive gaming behavior, but without resorting to those scientifically unwarranted solutions. But after all, as scholars, we need to take the lead in those initiatives. We really need to write, public-facing articles, reports that address issues that many parents have been failing to address or have been, hesitant to adopt positive or productive solutions. Yes, and this could be done internationally for sure. Like in Chinese case, it's not ad hoc. It's like it could happen in any other corner of the world, and I have very interesting accounts from Australian scholars. They even appreciate all those time management into policy on children's gameplay in China. They want the Australian government to do the same thing. But I'd like to hear the feedback from Daniel, possibly to say how would you feel, how would you perceive, or even think about the possibility of replicating those policies in Australia? Yeah, thank you, Jamie.
Thank you so much, and yeah, I do. I really take your point and agree with the skill building and digital competencies that need to decentralize. It's not just all about kids and young people, and it's about the context that they're in, and not just parents either, but teachers, community members, policymakers. I've put that one out there, but we need to develop those competencies in general. Thank you for those comments. I'm sure there'll be other comments that you'll make to answering some of the questions as well. Can we pass to Lydia now for your final comments?
Okay, so I want to talk about the positive gaming experience for young people in my research. Okay. In my opinion, two factors have a significant influence on positive gaming experience for young people. One is a balanced approach to gaming. This means setting limits on the amount of time spent playing games to ensure that it doesn't interfere with other important aspects of life, such as schoolwork, physical activity, and social interactions. When young people can manage their gaming time effectively, they are more likely to have a positive experience as they are not overwhelmed by it. The other is parental and adult guidance plays a vital role. Adults can help young people choose appropriate games, discuss the content and the potential impacts, and provide supportive environment for gaming. This ensures that young people make informed choices and have positive experiences. Yes, that's all.
Great, thank you, Lydia. And yeah, I think that what you brought up there in terms of self-regulation and promoting of self-regulation is really kind of the critical reasons why we would want to develop digital competencies amongst young people or amongst the youth themselves or anybody else. How can we use that, like you said, very pertinently in a balanced way, and understanding what the concept of balance means is so important, and that requires guidance, just as you mentioned. Thank you again, Lydia. I'll pass now to Dr. Wang Shu to please for your final comments.
Okay, I would like to talk more about the positive about the game impacts. And I also noticed that there's a question about the Black Miss Wukong here, and I have to say that in China we also have the game age rating system and game age recommendations. Black Miss Wukong is about 18 plus. Back to the impacts, especially the positive impact of video games. I think many games today, especially some of the 3A games, are no longer just a form of entertainment. Actually, they have the multiple values in terms of technology, economy, and culture. As we saw it today we may see these video games have become a new container for culture. For example, like the Black Miss Wukong, it incorporates many excellent traditional Chinese cultures and has achieved great success around the world, which has helped spirit the excellent traditional Chinese culture to a certain extent. And also, as I mentioned before, the real-time interactive things created by the video games provides a proving ground for artificial intelligence to strengthen its own learning ability. That's what I want to say. Yeah, thank you.
I've got another really wonderful soundbite, that you said that games are not just entertainment, that they're technology, economy, and culture. What a really wonderful way of pulling this together. I also agree with that. We cannot deny that gaming and technology is now underpinning a lot of the social structure, and we can, the more that we deny that it's a part of our everyday lives, as in it's running a lot of the economy, it's diffusing culture, and it's becoming a critical, important part of our lives. It's not going anywhere, is what I want to say. And so we do need to find ways to leverage in the most positive way. And those real-time interactivities. I don't know the game that you're talking about. Now I have to go look it up. So I think it's very important to think about what these specific case studies and technologies are, so that are doing good, or that are good case studies, but also ones that may not be so good, so we can think about what we can do better. Thank you so much. We're going to now pass to Professor Daniel Johnson for his final comments. Please go ahead, Daniel.
Thanks, Jamie. I think because the industry involvement in this panel, I'll focus on the academic industry nexus in answering the question. And I think, this is a very easy thing for me to say, but I do think in so many ways it's this simple. In the context of policymakers making decisions that we find problematic at best at the moment, I think there's more pressure than ever for us to find ways to work together. And one of the big challenges for us in academia is, we're doing work that we want to be relevant to industry. And I understand the frustrations of industry. We move a lot slower than industry. There are other barriers, but I think really to take things to the next level, and there's never been a more important time for that, I think we've got to really focus on trusting each other to build collaboration. So there's so much data that games companies have that we could use in academia that I think we could produce really interesting outputs from. In industry, you don't have the time to dive into it. We do have that time. We do have the resources, but it requires trust to share that data. In the same way, I think academia needs to do a better job of letting industry know what we're doing. So events like this are great for that. But, there are projects happening in our lab. I've got a student, Blake Kammerman, who's working on how you can transfer pro-social behavior from games to the real world. I think that would be really interesting to a lot of industry people. Another student, Dana Tranneman, is working on, well, how is disruptive and toxic behavior occurring for younger players? How do we get ahead of that at that early age? Again, I think that would be massively interesting to so many industry partners. So I think, I don't have the solutions, but it's a bit of a call to arms. I think we need to work better on finding those connections, because what I'm seeing is a lot of decisions being made in the wrong direction by regulators and policymakers. And so it feels really timely to try and do a better job of working together, not to, to get to the truth, to find the strengths and the weaknesses of games and when they can help and when we can help people avoid problematic situations. But yeah, I think working together more is going to be really important.
Thank you, Daniel. And I do want to say, having had conversations with many people from industry in the recent past, I think we want the same things. We just need to start talking the same language and getting on board, because we also, I think we all really recognize, especially, academics and those working in industry, recognize, but policymakers maybe less so, just how important these technologies are in people's lives. Like, we know why they're getting on there. We understand the psychology of it, kind of recognize the time spent and what that time spent is is important for. So I think we're on the same page, and I agree there are so many opportunities for us to work together, and maybe that's a good in for us, because I believe tech companies, industry wants the evidence because they want to they want to use it in the right way, and we can also produce better evidence. Thank you so much. Auxane, I'm going to pass to you for your final comments.
Thank you. Well, I was trying to figure out what should be the final comment, because my initial thought was about stakeholder and how we should all work together, but I think Daniel covered that very well. I also would like to add to that I think we should inform stakeholder better when it comes also to the policymakers, so that they are part of the stakeholder group, right? So academia, industry, 100% need to be stronger as a working together team. Well, I think we also need to find a way to have this interaction with the people that will end up making the decisions. And going on this, I want to talk about also how our grading systems for games are kind of aligned, not always, but also not adequate anymore with the upcoming of AI within the game systems and the gaming industry. So maybe that's also an area to focus on, I think, where we should all put our strength, because we don't talk a lot about it. We assume that's a done deal, that we have our grading systems and they work. Probably they don't so well anymore, and I think we can all agree that there's big caveats in there for everyone. So maybe that's more of a call to work on this topic and try to understand better different impacts. And finally, I think we're all trying to do our best here. So if we work together, I think we can just do better. That's it.
Thanks, Auxane, and this is why we're all here in the room today. And thank you to UNU Macau as well as Tencent for allowing this, and so that we can start such an important conversation. We now have 8 minutes for questions, so we might not be able to cover all of them, but I would like to. I'm going to go to the Q&A. We have a couple of questions that were answered already, so I'm not going to go over those. So thank you Jaejang and Chut for answering those questions. In terms of the open questions, we have a few different. I'm just going to start with the first one, and then I'll go to the chat. So so Jose has asked a question about elaborating on the usefulness for course management, student management, and connecting it to well-being. Maybe this is from a gamification point of view, but also has asked the question of what the differences in terms of well-being under the paradigm presented between online and collaborative online gaming. So I'm not sure who these questions are specifically addressed to. If anybody would like to talk about gaming in terms of student well-being, say within an educational context, or looking at well-being from the differences between, say, gaming that's non-collaborative versus collaborative gaming and those influences on well-being. Pass to the panel who would like to address one or other of those questions.
I can talk to collaborative versus competitive if you want.
Please go ahead.
So what research says mostly is that, we had this entire topic about video games making people aggressive and having aggressive behavior. And so research looked into a bit more than the surface of this whole. So already taking out the argument of like all other factors, right? Because that's usually what's missing in this research. They looked also in the design of the games and what might make people more heightened in anger versus less. And what they saw is that collaborative games were much more positive in the outcome also of the well-being feeling of the person after playing short and midterm than competitive games. But I think in general, you can, we're talking about video games here, but I'm pretty sure that if I tell you that about football, you'd agree it's the same. Or if I'm telling you that this about any game, it's basically the same. So they're just saying that collaboration in general makes people feel better than competition. and that will impact general well-being and perception of self. That's it.
Thank you, Auxane. Would any of the panelists like to address the concept of gaming within education and how we can use that either within like the usefulness of it and how we can connect it to well-being for students?
I can talk to it in a general sense, Jamie. I think the easy out, and it's not a cop-out, but I accept that it's challenging to do. But I think from the basic theory that I was talking about, you'd be looking for ways to increase the senses of competence, autonomy, relatedness in their learning. I think there is always going to be a challenge around getting you to work rather than play. But I think putting that aside, the best advice I could give is trying to find ways to satisfy those needs in what you're doing. Acknowledging that that's such an easy thing to say and such a hard thing to do.
Thank you so much, Daniel. And I think all people who are teaching, whether it's at primary school or secondary school or even university, have struggled with the concept of gamification of learning because it's something that students say they want, but it's not necessarily something that always works. So I think, you know, what you did there is just put it into the context of what needs are you trying to meet, because sometimes I think we forget that we don't need to gamify everything within learning. And sometimes the gamification of it actually distracts or can pull away from the formal assessment criteria that students will ultimately face. And what I mean by that is, you know, like we're still gonna test you. We're still gonna give you formal assessments to write. So it's really important that it's not gamification is good in some contexts. It can be helpful and engaging, but it needs to meet a need. So that's super important. The next question is going to go to you, Daniel, as well. So this is actually from Auxane, I believe. So I'm mediating a question, which is to actually ask, and it's a question that I'm very interested as well. Maybe she asked it for me. I don't know. That is, did you about the evaluations of well-being, and if you're evaluating well-being across cultures and across cultural perspectives, I guess, and do you have a plan on doing that if you don't currently do it? And maybe Auxane could add more to that if she would like to, but I'll start there.
Sure. Just interrupt me, Auxane, if I'm missing the point or you want to ask follow-ups. But we've used a number of measures of well-being. So much of the work I was talking about has been across satisfaction with life, vitality, psychological distress. We've done some more recently with the Wellbeing Pro, which is a much more heterogeneous measure of well-being. It covers, I think, 15 different facets. We haven't done... Occasionally I say things like this and then someone reminds me that we did something like this, but I don't think we've ever done comparing culture A with culture B. I do have a master's student at the moment working on, Yu is her name, working on what the need satisfaction looks like in the context of Chinese students studying in Australia. So she's doing qualitative work exploring what that looks like. Not culturally, but we have looked at these sort of relationships in other samples like early onset psychosis patients. So we've tried looking in different contexts, some work around culture, but I think it'd be great to do more.
Thanks, because then my only follow-up is let's connect after, because we can
Great.
maybe reproduce your research.
That'd be lovely.
Places. Super cool.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're very interested. Okay, so I see Min asked a question about Black Myth. Sorry, I thought it was Black Mist. And I know that Wang Shu had mentioned that had addressed a little bit of this, but I'm not sure if anybody or Wang Shu would like to say anything more about this. That is, you know, it is a popular game. Apparently, that it has some. There have been some negative comments about it because of scary images fighting violence, and whether this belongs to the category of video games that we've discussed. If so, what are the opinions on this phenomenon? I kind of do want to say as well, like as much as I don't know the game, I believe many of the gameplay experiences that we're talking about here were not necessarily talking about this type of gaming, although it doesn't mean that this couldn't be included in that if people are using this type of gaming to meet a need. But because I don't know the game very well at all, I can't say much about that. Would any of the panelists, specifically Wang Shu or Lydia or JJ or anyone, Auxane or Daniel, if you know this game, like to respond to this?
I have thoughts, but other people should speak first. I both have opinions on the game and on the idea that some games are better than others and on violence in games, but...
Well, yep, go
Well,
ahead.
I say a quick thing about like it's interesting to see the different versions of Black Myth Wukong released through different gaming platforms. I'm not sure about is that about Chinese parents, right? So if they bought the game for their children on the WeGame platform, much of the violence content has been censored. You are not gonna see the red blood. You're gonna see some names for like calling ghost something. All this has been censored in line with the government policy. So I'm not really thinking that's the like some phobia, gaming phobia caused by a specific game. I feel it's more like a continuation of how parents like having this inertia to reject the idea of gaming for their own family, to kind of like decline their children's request to access high quality games and have a related gaming experience. So from my own opinion, it's better to bring those parents to play the game by themselves. Let them know the game and judge for their kids.
I would like to leave it open to the other panelists, and Daniel, if you'd want to add something more. I think this is a really important part of discussions about gaming, and if it's something that we can discuss a little bit more from an evidence-based point of view, that would be fantastic and I think very helpful to the participants.
I'm torn between leaving an awkward pause and contributing too much. Does no one else want to jump in here? I've got three thoughts here. One, the effects of video games actually making people violent have been disproven so many times. The effect size is so small as to be negligible. It's nonsense. This is not a real thing. And the sooner we stop promulgating it, the better. The effect size, the most concerned researcher in the world acknowledged that the effect size is about equivalent to watching Roadrunner or Bugs Bunny. It's trivial and it's not real. So let's put that aside. I think there's a really important conversation to have about what's appropriate for your child and engaging with media within a family and making sure that's done in a healthy way and making family choices about what media you want to play and what you want to do. In terms of this type of game, ignoring any violence effects, there is not a type of game that is good for you and a type of game that is bad for you beyond the game that you want to play and that satisfies your needs. So if you love Black Myth Wukong, it will serve that purpose. If you love Super Mario, it will serve that purpose. And if you love Tetris, it'll serve that purpose. And different people like different games at different times. I've had a really hard day at work. I might want to come home and play some Black Myth Wukong to let off some steam. Or I might be the kind of person that wants to come home and play, I'm blanking on the name of that beautiful watermelon game that had the lovely music. It's different games for different periods of time, for different moods, for different people. But there is no research to support that action games or strategy games are good for you and other games are bad for you. I see I've triggered you, Auxane. Please jump on in.
Sorry, first I want to say I agree 100%. I just want to add one little thing about children, that it's the same. You wouldn't put a kid in front of a very bloody movie. Well, don't put them in front of a very bloody game. That's it. So it's not about making them violent. It's more about, as you were saying, having this conversation of what do I share with my kids? What is age appropriate for them specifically and in general? And yeah, anyway, 100% agree. We need to stop saying that games are making people violent and anything else, because that's just not a thing.
Thank you for all of those contributions, and I don't think we could have actually said it better. Thank you for pulling in the evidence there, Daniel, and I would encourage people to read the systematic reviews and meta-analyses which are out there, and I didn't want to prime anybody, but I also very much agree, you know, like looking at motivations and young people's and our own motivations to consume media, all forms of media, not just games, but how we use it and why. And those we find that the motivational factors, which are very much related to the needs, are often what's driving outcomes. And I think this is a very can be a bit of a challenging thing to discuss because it's complex, and that means we have to ask hard questions. So let's ask the hard questions about the whys, the hows, the conditions, the context of games, and then think about that from that point of view. I know we are now 5 minutes over time, which I'm surprised we're only 5 minutes over time, considering the richness of this panel and the conversation that was had. I know we weren't able to answer all the questions in a great deal of detail, but I do hope that that the participants who were able to stay on got a lot out of this. I know that I did, and I was very encouraged to hear that that the evidence is pointing in the direction from many different spaces, and that we are on the same page if we can talk in the same space with the same aims. So how do we get people together? I think this is very clear. We get people together by talking from an evidence-based point of view, by talking about complexity, by bringing in young people's experiences, by bringing in families' experiences, by talking to teachers as well. I know that Jose in the chat was interested in how we can balance it from that point of view, but we need everybody to come together to talk about these influences and not fall back on the rhetoric, which is the rhetoric of this causes that versus how people are actually using technology and what young people get out of it, what we get out of it, and growing a sense of awareness of that, as well as I do want to say from all of the panelists that was covered in such beautiful detail about the needs for competencies development. So it's not just about where we sit a child, it's about maybe the child needs to sit and see that because their friend is playing that game. They see it happening. They know it's happening. So maybe you do need to sit with your child and then explain and help them understand, because technology is a part of our lives, gaming is a part of our lives, and it will continue to be so. Thank you everybody for your participation, and to the panel. We will attempt to distribute the PowerPoint slides. There will be a recording of this fabulous webinar, and do expect to see some synthesis of this information come out from UNU Macau. I really appreciate everybody's time today, and I hope you got as much out of it as what I did. Thank you all.